So religion will remain in different formats with lesser influence, but larger institutions, which would probably turn them into the real business that they are in, the corporate business that they are. The number of non-believers in these countries. There is no single faith in Britain which has more support than the idea of non-belief. Three separations: separation of state and religion, separation of religion and education, separation of religion and the value system. First of all, welcome to all of you. We are eventually, we have started this by a coincidence in Malayalam language, which happens to be my mother tongue. But since this is a very successful model, and we are now making it available in other languages also. And this meeting is recorded now, and an edited version will later be able to upload. So the primary question, that we have been discussing for a long time, in many forums, it's very clear question. The present trends that we see in Europe clearly shows that there is a decline of faith in Europe. And if you take any kind of projections, what we see in Europe in the last 100 years is an indication that all organized religions and their influence are going to be in decline, further decline in the coming years. Northern Europe, Switzerland, Germany, UK, any given part in this form, if you see, there is a decline of religion. But there are other pockets in Europe where religion is still not only powerful, but there are more and more people attracted to religion. For example, Poland. Very conservative politics is taking the control of the situation in Poland. There are laws that are even against the fundamental principles of European Union are being implemented in Poland. Recently, there have been huge demonstrations in Poland with hundreds of thousands of people in the streets against the very conservative abortion laws that they implemented there. So what happens in some parts of Europe is quite promising, that people are asking for more and more freedom. And on other sides, there are promising growth in Northern Europe and many other parts of the Western world. The number of people, there is a recent study by National Geographic magazine about the status of faith and religion in different countries. Generally, many people believe that, or it's claimed that Christianity is in decline. It's true. Christianity is in decline in Europe. And Islam is going to overtake Christianity. That's what many people think. And it's claimed, it's written in many places. What are the projections that they have? There is a big change in I'll read the study that is published recently. You don't usually think of churches as going out of business, but it happens. In March, driven by parishioner deaths and lack of interest, the UK Mennonites held their last collective service. That's how the article begins. So the article further quotes a lot of studies. One of the major studies that projects one very important information: religiosity, unaffiliated. Some people call them atheists, non-believers, the faithless people. Their number is growing significantly in Europe. They are the second largest religious group. That's, if you use the term religious group for non-believers also, they are the second largest group in Europe now. It's not Islam that has taken over Christianity, but it's atheism, non-belief that has taken over Europe. And I mean, also in other parts of the Western world. In United States, the nones make up almost a quarter of the population. In the past decade, US nones have overtaken the Catholics, the mainline Protestants, and all followers of non-Christian faiths. If you take a single faith system, if you call atheism also a faith system, the non-believers have overtaken the Catholics, the Protestant groups, and any other religion as a single unit in United States. Still is considered a country with a lot of influence of religion. So with this, the projections in Europe, if you take, in the next 80 years, by the end of this century, the influence of religion, whatsoever we have here, is going certainly to be in the decline. I don't think that religions will totally vanish, because religion is not only a question of our mind, but it is also a question of keeping a lot of establishments in connection with that. There are religious institutions, there are a huge number of people recruited in the service of the religion. Take the example of Catholic Church. The number of priests and nuns and the bishops and the institutions that they hold, whatever changes happens, that may remain. So religion will remain in different formats with lesser influence, but larger institutions, which would probably turn them into the real business that they are in, the corporate business that they are, for many religions. But what does this mean? Are we reaching a situation, a very promising situation, that by the end of the century, the ideas of liberty, freedom, and all these kind of things are going to be over, and we are going to have a fine new world with liberty, equality, fraternity, and freedom of faith, and all these kind of things are completely flourishing? The indications are on that line if you see only Europe. But with these present projections, can we see the whole global situation with a similar yardstick? It could be difficult. Why? Because religion is, when I say religion, I mean the mainstream religion. For example, the Semitic religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. So Hinduism and Judaism are not converting anybody. Islam and Christianity are the two competing religions who are trying to win more people to their faith and expand their empire further. Both these religions are in competition in Africa. And the number of people who are moving from animism or the belief in ancestors and their power to either Christianity or to Islam, that's not in the decline. There are still a lot of people moving towards this faith. And how many percentage, what percentage of people are moving out of religion in Africa? Very less. The reason is not the lack of awareness, but the lack of political liberty. In many countries, you cannot speak your mind. I mean, as you all know, in 13 countries, if you're a non-believer, if you question the traditional faith the people are having there, you can be killed. That includes some of the African countries also. But not only that, in countries like Uganda, if one is a gay, a homosexual, he can be, that's a punishment that can call for a very serious punishment, which can even lead to death penalty. And if the governments don't do it, there are mobs ready to implement it. Like the cow jalans in India. The laws say that if you eat cow in India, you get 10 years imprisonment. But the question of 10 years of imprisonment does not arise normally when the crowd knows that you have eaten it. They would execute the verdict by themselves. Why? Because there are people who think that they are the custodians of the faith and they have to implement it, and they are the people chosen by their faith to implement their faith. That's the same situation vis-a-vis governments of many countries in the West Asian world as well as in many African countries. People cannot speak their faith. If one is a non-believer, if you speak it out in Saudi Arabia, you know what's the status of an atheist in Saudi Arabia? It's an act of terrorism, which can call for execution. And that's the only country that calls being an atheist is as equal as a terrorist. So these are the countries where people are not actually transforming from traditional faiths to modern worldview. That remains there. The political power there is so despotic and authoritarian, and any change in the immediate future is not indicated anywhere. There is no guarantee that the political structures in Saudi Arabia or the Emirates are going to change very soon. I don't say that things won't change. It can change in different directions anywhere. For example, Iran, one good example. The Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1970, when the Shias taken over the power, a lot of people who otherwise had different views than a theocratic state had to flee the country. And as I know very closely, many of those people who have been fleeing from Iran, and with my extreme happiness, I found many of them active, speaking for freedom and liberty and about a world without the influence of religion. People like Maryam Namasi. I mean, they all are coming from Iran. So a lot of people who came out from the control of traditional religion, they have changed and they have tried to influence the society in a different direction. But that's when they have reached Europe. So those people who have reached a world where there is more freedom than in the traditional societies, there they have the option to believe in whatever they want. Nobody is against anybody having their faith. I think no civilized society should be able to say that also. I am an atheist. That doesn't mean that I would not respect other people having other faiths. I have many Christian friends, I have many Hindu friends, I have many Muslim friends, and I don't talk faith with them because I consider faith is a personal matter, and I don't accept if anybody tries to impose their faith upon me, and nor do I do on the other side. I will make public opinion, I will make discourses, I will write, and nobody should be able to force other people or indoctrinate other people against their wishes about faith. But that's not what's happening. In countries where people are vulnerable, where there are people who are not really understanding things, where the education is lacking, where there is political control and fear of authority, at another side, the indoctrination is keeping on going and they have no choice. So therefore, the African situation is not very promising. There are more and more people in Africa going into conservative ideas as compared to those people who are leaving the traditional faith. So those people who are coming out from animism, for example, are they going to the camp of non-believers? No. They are being attracted either to Islam or to Christianity. Very few people have come out, but they are coming out from, for example, from the mainstream religions, not from animism. The conversions are still happening there. So the African situation is not very promising for the rationalist world. Of course, there are very promising signs. There are very powerful people coming out and speaking out and trying to influence societies, but they are paying their prices. Mubarak Bala, you know about in Nigeria, when he has written some Facebook posts. Now, when he was arrested, nobody knew where he was. And now only, it was identified that he's still alive and he could meet a lawyer. In the Saudi Arabia, when a young man, Badai, when he has written a Facebook post making a critical opinion about the mainstream faith. He was arrested and he is getting something like 100 whipping every week. Will he survive it or not? No one knows. His wife and children have escaped to Canada and they've been speaking, and Amnesty International is taking over this issue all around the world. So anybody who is speaking out is attacked, persecuted, and their right to express is totally suppressed. Therefore, there is not much change actually happening in reality in the despotic countries. So when we speak about change of the world as to be projected after 80 years from now, with a given situation, with the given circumstances, there is not much hope in the despotic countries. Unless and until the liberal forces come out, there are dramatic changes in the political structure. Some powerful political leaders emerge who can transform the whole thing. Things could change. Like what happened during Kemal Atatürk's time in Turkey. As you all know, Turkey, Istanbul was the world capital of the Muslim empire. After the defeat of the Byzantine Empire by Mehmed, the monarch of Turkey was the Caliph of the whole Muslims. There was a global center for Islam at that time. But in a political change within, Kemal Atatürk changed the whole thing and he established a secular society there. If such a thing happens in any despotic countries that are controlled by authoritarian rule now, there can be big change. But that such changes, even if the political climate changes, like what happened in Turkey now, I mean, for example, when the political authority when started defending values against the values of Kemal Atatürk, still there is a very powerful secularist movement in Turkey which is still pursuing their positions, and they can do that. So the changes, so we have to see things in the given framework. In Saudi Arabia, in most of these Islamic countries, all the Islamic countries are not that, for example, when we see only Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. But there are many so-called Muslim countries which are much liberal and systems are different. We don't speak about Morocco, we don't speak about Egypt, we don't speak about Tunisia, Lebanon, Libya. I mean, there are many countries where the situation is much more comparatively progressive than some of these monarchies. So there are people who are existing in all these countries who speak out their opinion. I had, for example, in the Rationalist International Conference in Tallinn, I had representatives coming from Lebanon participating in the conference and speaking about their situation. I've seen university teachers from Egypt coming and speaking about ideas of liberty. So there are possibilities in many countries. It's not all that bad, but fear is a very powerful force that stops people coming out. That is exactly what the Catholic Church has been doing during the Dark Ages. Anybody who questioned was persecuted, burned alive, or arrested, or tortured and eliminated by Inquisition courts, by witch hunting. So for a long period, faith was the mainstream in many parts of Europe because political brutality was used to keep this faith. Then there have been the French Revolution. It was a big change with a new value system emerging out of that. Equality, fraternity, and liberty becomes the predominant value system that influences Europe in the coming years after that. Though it took a long time, and though it has also created another monarch like Napoleon Bonaparte, which has more geographical ambitions, the idea of a society not theocratic got its value, and it has reached far-reaching places after the French Revolution. So Europe has started changing after the French Revolution. And despite the attacks done by a few radicals in France, the majority of the people of France are not attracted to terrorism. I am not at all supporting the idea that all Muslims are terrorists. Because, I mean, if one takes that kind of a position, one would not be a tolerant person or a person of liberty at all. The majority of the Muslims, like majority of any other people, are peaceful people. They are living with their faith. They were believing all the time. I may not be supporting their views and I may not be accepting their views and I have a different opinion. I would like them to come to liberty, but with their faith, most of them are living peacefully. They are not attracted by these terrorists. But the moment we try to isolate all Muslims as terrorists, that will be drawing a lot of people towards extremism. That's my view on that. But on the other side, I don't think there is any dramatic changes that are happening with the influence of Islam growing in Europe. The projections that many people that are making that Islam is going to overtake Christianity, they are not seeing the number of people who are leaving faith in Europe. That's where the projections actually not going correctly. That's precisely what National Geographic, based on several studies that includes Eurobarometer made by European Union, trying to explain. For example, the number of people leaving the Christian faith in the whole European continent is increasing. The pace is so fast. People are leaving churches. Churches have become museums. And people would like to visit these places as historic pieces, not as a place of expressing their faith anymore. The number of priests all around the world is in decline. The church is crying to get more and more nuns. They're not getting enough people. Because for the Catholic Church, it's not the laity that's important. It's the hierarchy, their structure, their establishment, their priests, their nuns. That's more important because that's where the wealth is coming for the Catholic Church. You know, there is a decline of the number of priests in Catholic Church. And they are making aggressive recruitment, still they are failing. Another interesting story, I mean, which is something that has irked the Catholic Church much before my controversial exposure of the Mumbai miracle, was one of the cover stories that I've written for the Outlook magazine in India. That was when one Sister Alfonsa was beatified and when she was made a saint by the Catholic Church. You know, this Saint Alfonsa was beatified some years back. She died at the age of 35 and never a prominent person in the faith structure. Nobody has taken her serious when she was alive. She was an ill person, was ignored and suffered a lot and died at a very young age. But church simply picked up this case of, you know, ignoring this person when she was ill, and I mean that was going as a rumor all throughout. And church picked up this story and suddenly identified with this nun as a saint. And you know, the process of Catholic Church to get somebody beatified and then later declared as a saint, they need 2 miracles attributed to the person. So they brought a boy claiming that he was limping earlier and crossed this tomb, and then he's now walking properly, and I mean, they started the process. But one small interesting thing was when the beatification process started, every Catholic school in Kerala started projecting the story of Alfonsa in all classes, which is illegal in India. You cannot promote a religion in the class, but they have been doing it. And when the sainthood was declared in Vatican, at the same time, there were demonstrations by students of all these Catholic schools in Kerala. And the students were asked, they were provided dress of nuns during the demonstration. They were encouraged, they were promoted to identify with the Sister Alfonsa and as potential recruits for the future. Why? It's an interesting thing. The Kottayam district in Kerala, that's where Alfonsa was coming. You know, if you take the whole nun population in the whole world, 52% of the whole nuns in the world of Catholic Church are coming from India, where the Catholic population is only 2%, or less than 2%. Because there is concentration of Catholics in certain areas, Kottayam being one. And in Kottayam, out of the whole nuns in India, 92% of them are coming from Kerala, precisely from the Kottayam district. That's where a lot of families are sending one child or two children to the Catholic Church to become the nuns. And that's where they have made this demonstration. This was a process to recruit future nuns, where the nuns population is going down everywhere. In the United States, the average age of a nun is 70 years. All over Europe, Catholic institutions are not getting enough nuns. You know why nuns are important? The nuns are part of the church, but never paid. They don't get a salary, but they work. The Catholic Church has several institutions, all major successful institutions that includes education institutions and hospitals are being run with these nuns working there. And the salaries are never given to them, but taken by the church. Legally, you have to give a salary. The services are taken free of cost. Another example, in India, if you are a university teacher, the salary is coming from the University Grants Commission. In a school, which is affiliated school with the state system, the salaries are paid by the government. It's run by the private institutions, but the salaries are coming from the state. The nuns are officially getting their salary, but the money is collected by the Mother Superior and is straight away going to the church. And they are given token money for basic survival. This is sheer exploitation. It's a kind of modern slavery, but that's one of the major income of the Catholic Church. That's how they're running their institution. That's why these nuns are going down from 1960s. The great revolution of ideas that began in 1960s has influenced the whole generation of people belonging to the areas where they could make early recruits. Nuns started coming down. 1960s, that's where it all began. 1960s, that has been a big changing point in the modern world. After the Second World War, 1945, the colonies started disintegrating and the ideas of new worlds started reaching everywhere. 1960s, you can see a lot of new wonderful movements emerging. The peace movement, the movement for gender equality, feminism, the environment movement, ecology movement, rationalism, all got great leap in early 1960s. The innovation of the pill, the contraceptive pill, dramatically changed the worldview of the people. Because women could realize that moment onwards that they could enjoy sexuality without the fear of getting impregnated. That has liberalized the sexual life of people within the family and outside the family. The popularity of washing machines, the cooking system, the urban middle class everywhere changed, their lifestyles have changed, and there have been big change in the whole structure. This is the time when there have been a large number of people started leaving traditional faith because they could think more, they could think about freedom, their ideas of new liberty came. And that's when the nunnery, the Catholic nuns number and the priest number started declining dramatically. They're trying to capture it back. It's very difficult. They don't get any more nuns from Europe. They need places like India, Philippines, and Latin America to recruit nuns and priests. So the major effort of the two major Semitic religions, Christianity and Islam, are targeting either for economic reasons or expansionist ideas or global victory, whatever they are for. That's targeting no more Europe. They understood that Europe is no more a fertile ground. They are trying it still in Poland, in Ireland and other places. They're still trying, but it's not a major success. If you project the position of religion in the coming 80 years in Europe, I would say that it would certainly decline. Many people are afraid that the migration from the people of Islamic background can change Europe backward. No. I am very closely associated with a lot of people from Islamic background. And what I have seen in the European Union as well as in UK, that a lot of people who come to Europe are getting modernized and influenced by the Western way of life. It may have different levels, different variations. Only a very few people, very few number of people are influenced by the ideas of extremism and terrorism. And the more and more extremist activities crop up here and there, people are more and more getting afraid to associate with these people. It's identified. It's very clearly identified and it's targeted. And of course, terrorism is a big threat. It's to be addressed very strictly. But the Europe policies are not trying to see all Muslims dangerous. That's what many people want Europe to believe, but that's not correct, and that's not how it is going. For example, in London, the city mayor is from Pakistan. He's of Muslim origin. But nobody complains that he's spreading Islam with that. He is implementing the laws of Britain and standing for the European values. There can be minor variations, but nobody is trying to make London an Islamic dominated structure. Maybe there are many people who are of Islamic origin are coming, but they are not. If you see the projections of even British population, if you take the population growth of Muslims and the population growth of Christianity, you see that there is a certain growth of the growth rate of Islam is much more than the growth rate of Christianity, because more and more Christians are leaving church and leaving out to freedom, to non-faith, to atheism. And the most interesting thing, which all these projections forget to see, the number of non-believers in these countries. There is no single faith in Britain which has more support than the idea of non-belief. No single religion, including Anglican Church. In Finland, if you take the European Barometer seriously, which is one of the most reliable evaluation of the faith system of people, 81% of the population are not faith-based people. They are people out of their faith. They don't care for religion. They live peacefully without any religion. And still, Finland is at the top of the world index of happiness. The neighboring country, Estonia, has a high number of second largest non-believing population is in Estonia. And the globe's largest number of percentage of non-believers, that's in Czech Republic. In Sweden, in Norway, in Denmark, in Iceland, in Switzerland, in Germany, everywhere. The number of non-believers, and if you take the number of people who are going to non-faith patterns, if you take their proportion, and if you take the growth rate of them, there is no single faith that has that kind of growth rate. So it's very clear that Europe is going very clearly towards the side of rational thought, secularism, and more people coming out of religion. And that will have a great impact, after 3-4 generations in Europe. Even now, in most of the churches in Europe, not in Poland, may not be in Ireland also, but most of the places, churches are just museums. You can rent it out for anything. Concerts, and churches have turned into bars in some places. So that's a trend that is set. It's very difficult to reverse it. The wheel is rolling very clearly. But that's not the case in other countries. And that's where the population is growing very fast. The population in Asia is growing very fast. There, the number of people leaving the faith, of different faith, any kind of faith, is lesser and less. I mean, it's still growing, but the percentage of growth and growth of people leaving religion and the general population growth, there is no comparison. So if you take a clear objective projection of the status of faith at the end of the century, there could still be influence of religion in many parts of Asia, Africa, and Latin America. That may still keep religious position existing in the global map. It's not going to go very fast. And also another possibility that we have to always think, that religions have sometimes declined, gone into oblivion, but they're transformed. If you remember the Roman emperors, they were the gods themselves. When Alexander was invading India and coming through Persia and all these places, he himself was the god. The new emperor would be the new god. But from there, when Constantine, a new structure came, they have established the church faith as the major thing, and they have conquered many parts of the world. With geographical discoveries, it has expanded to many new places. So there were two expansions. One was the aggressive expansion of Islam, the Arabian Empire, during the time of Muhammad, and the political advantage that the Christian kingdoms and empires had earlier. Spain and Portugal and all these countries have been expanding to many parts of the world with geographical discoveries. Along with that, they have expanded religion to new territories and suppressed any criticism of religion in the main Europe. So this twofold strategy was helping religion to grow in those times. But both have changed. There is a dramatic change worldwide. Religion will be in decline, certainly, but don't have over expectation and wrong ideas. We will have to go a long, long, long way to achieve more liberty, more liberal atmosphere in the world, and more tolerance in this world. So therefore, unless and until dramatic changes happen, as happened in Turkey, or towards the progressive side, it could take still longer time, if you take the global perspective, that religions vanish. Therefore, the careful public education with two major insistence as part of the political and social structure is important. I think that the whole effort should be concentrated, if you aim at a new world without the influence of religion in the mainstream structure, with people can decide for themselves, they have to insist on secularism in the fullest form of it. I would mean that secularism has grown much above than what originally Holyoake said. He meant a separation of state and religion. Second Amendment in the United States made a separation of wall between religion and state, but it has gone much beyond, much above and further from there. Now it involves separation of state and religion at one side, separation of education and religion the second side, and on a third front, separation of the value system from religion. New values have emerged. The new values of liberty has grown. Ideas of freedom has further expanded its terrain. And we know many things that we thought 40 years back or 50 years back were wrong. We have new ideas about the sexual orientation and the liberties connected with that. We have new ideas very clearly about human liberty. The idea of democracy has grown further. Earlier we have been speaking about majority. Now we are speaking about the last single person, the lone person, to have his right to speak what he wants, what he thinks right. That's the latest position of democracy. So all these ideas have developed. The value system have changed. So a humane value system has to be established, and religion should be separated from it without influencing its course. So these three separations: separation of state and religion, separation of religion and education, separation of religion and the value system. We have to campaign for any single slogan alone would not make the change. If you want a world with more liberty, more freedom, more people having the freedom to choose their life, whether they should have religion or not, that can be achieved only when we have an integrated approach to the whole problem. The values of liberty, equality, and fraternity has to be established, and these three pillars of secularism has to be insisted at the political level, at the social level, and at all possible levels. Opinion makers have to be influenced. We have to write articles. We have to discuss with politicians, because changes do not come with mass majority of people coming to the streets. But I always think that it's the thinking people who can influence positions when they think, when they discuss, that influences opinions, and that will eventually change society. That's where we are. So the model of this meeting, this discussion, is this was designed in a form that the ancient dialogues that happened in the republics earlier. So here, I'm just presenting a subject with my perspective. I would like that all of you, or any one of you who wants to contribute to what I said, or who wants to add some opinion, or even have a different position than I have, you're welcome. This is an open forum. Thank you.
Okay. Can you hear me?
First of all, introduce you. Mr. Mohan Malhotra is from India by origin, but he's living in UK for a long time. A very active participant in all the major activities that we are doing. Please.
Yeah, I'm a humanist by nature. I'm a member of British Humanist Association, and I do attend your Rationalist international meetings also. I feel that the important thing about getting away from religion is that we need to educate people to think, what are called critical thinking, which is missing in the education. I mean, I think it's once people start thinking themselves, they can make a value judgment about the situation, and that's what is missing, because they follow blind faith for which they have to get away from. That's what I think is important. Now, one thing which you didn't mention at all is the situation in India. When we're talking about Europe and other, I know Europe, we are quite advanced towards rational thinking and all that. But in India, we are going backwards. I mean, although we got a secularism there, but I think it's just in name. I mean, the way it's happening in reverse, where we are telling Muslims are suppressing others, but in India, Hindus are not suppressing Muslims and non-Hindus. And India is one of the major countries in the world, and I think that's it's very important that we don't get away while we talk about other countries and forget about what's happening back at home. It really hurts me when I see what's going on in the country, you know. And I personally believe that secularism is accepting. We accept all the views, as you suggested, all the religions. You know, we may not agree with you. I don't like to call atheism or humanism as a religion. I may call it as a group, you know, because I think religion to me is a blind faith. I mean, that's what somebody mentioned about religion, means that you're going to follow Gita, Bible, or, you know, Quran or whatever. And this is why I would never call myself a religious person. I would always call myself, I believe to a non-religious group. And it is important, I think it's important that when we talk to people, we tell them to think. I mean, I've got friends of Muslims, Hindus, Muslims. I mean, I talk with everybody, and I go to temple. I go to temple because I go to mandir because I'm able to meet people there. I'm able to talk to them. I don't pray because I won't pray, but it's not that I won't mingle with them. I go to church. If somebody says, oh, there's a service for somebody's died, something, I say, okay, I'll come to church. I mean, I'll go there. I'll take part, but I will not pray. That's the only difference between me and somebody who has got a faith. So I think it's important. I personally believe that we should have a secular government, but religion should be part of education, not away from education. It should be a part. We should tell people about various religions, right, and also about humanism and other things. But let people make judgment. That's how I view about atheism. Anyway.
Yeah, thank you very much for that contribution. I mean, first, there is no dispute that promotion of critical thinking and promoting children to think critically, and instead of getting indoctrinated. I mean, when I meant stopping indoctrination. That means that we have to, I mean, maybe I didn't focus that when I said exactly, but yes, absolutely right that critical thinking and the faculties of critical thinking to be evoked at the early stages of education instead of getting them indoctrinated is one of the key things that we have to do. I fully agree. Second thing, coming to India, the Indian situation is quite alarming, you know, and many of us have already seen. I've recently given an interview warning that there is a potential danger that India could become a Hindu Iran. I mean, that has been, some friends did not feel it very comfortable with that statement. I do not know, because if things go out of control, there are forces in India which are asking for Hindu theocratic state. The present day ruling party may not be officially saying it, but the fringe groups outside, many of them are very powerfully demanding such a situation. So there are two possibilities in India. Now it's more and more there is a possibility trend which can influence to that direction. And the radical groups all around the political spectrum there are getting more and more intolerant. Many people are living in fear in India, and there is a fear that we are going in a dangerous direction than what we had in the beginning of the government in 1947. Absolutely right. I fully share with that view. But what we can do, the only thing that we can do is, I mean, developing public opinion about that, and that's what we are trying. But has that increase the faith in India, the political Hindu, whether it has influenced the acceleration of faith in India? I do not know exactly. Politics is using religion for an end, and that's what is getting more and more dangerous. The common, I mean, that is why perhaps I didn't come to India at that time. But of course, I fully understand and share with your views about that. And of course, I would not call myself or my views as a faith or a religion. I would consider I am free from any kind of dogma or religion or faith system. And I would like to be a person open-minded, science as the guiding light to understand things and open for correction and not following any kind of dogma of any sort. Thank you very much for that contribution. Thank you very much. Nice to see you also.
Thanks. Nice to see you again.
Can you hear me?
Sarunas, I'll introduce Sarunas. He's leader of the Rationalist movement in Lithuania.
7 years, I think. The Rationalist movement and the president of the Lithuanian Skeptic Youth. So,
yes.
I wanted to say that to the last person who spoke that we are trying to do the education part here in Lithuania. We're organizing international projects. We did the project Critical Thinking Development for Lithuanian and Polish Youth, which was quite successful, and now we're trying to multiply it, like doing more events like this. Also, last week I presented a project proposal about Kazimieras Ličinskis, the one of the first atheists of Lithuania. Sanal was gracious enough to write a script for a theater play. So in the next month or two, we'll get an answer, and if it's successful, then we will be able to create a professional drama theater play, and also a documentary movie about the whole project, about the first atheists of Lithuania, and about atheism in the region, in the future. How is the rational movement, contributing to the society and culture? So we are trying, in our own independent, way to make some changes. But my question, maybe for all of the people in the discussion, is how can we ask the government to be more involved in promoting critical thinking?
Education. I mean, it should be a part of education at the school level and in colleges. People should be taught logic to think themselves. I think it's happening. It's happening in the UK also. When I talk to people, they say they do learn logic and they do learn critical thinking. So it's happening, I think, which is the good news.
Okay,
Also, I would like to inform that in Lithuania, for example, Sarunas in the Kaunas city. Kaunas is going to be the cultural capital of Europe 2022. His organization is getting support from the city council. He has got an office from the state, and I've been there also. So one kind of support is coming from. It's very, very relieving seeing the situation in the neighboring country, Poland. But though Lithuania is one of those countries which did not get that kind of success vis-a-vis non-belief as compared to Latvia and Lithuania and in Finland, still, there is support from the city and the authorities is very, very promising. So you are in a better climate than many other people in different countries. All the best for your play.
Thank you. But can I ask one more question? Like
Please.
Education, should it be like? Yes, I agree that it should be like logic and epistemology, but should it be integrated to the subjects like that already been taught, or should it be some kind of another subject?
I think, epistemology, if you specifically bring that as a subject, less and less number of people would be interested in that, because it will be seen only as a part of the philosophical study. But if you integrate the ideas of epistemology and critical thinking in the general education, because once you develop, in India, we use a term called the scientific temper, which only means a scientific attitude to things that we do. So if that is developed, and the ideas of critical thinking and epistemology is part of the whole process of understanding things with a critical mind. So it should be integrated to the whole education process. The curriculum content has to be modified.
I agree. Okay. Yes, thank you.
Sarunas has been a fellow of Erasmus Foundation, and he has been an intern working with the Rationalist International for nearly a year. And I'm so happy that he is now matured enough to lead a state organization and movement.
Good.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Anybody else?
Yeah, so, you were talking of education.
Yeah.
What I see as education
just 1 second. Introduce yourself.
in India or in Europe or any country which is more or less secular. Education is there. The education is very critical. Hello?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So the education is, I think the education, people are being educated properly. It is the indoctrination possibly happens at home, not in these countries, of course. I'm not talking of the Middle Eastern countries where things could be different. I don't know, because it's the government who is having the religious laws implemented. But in secular countries, it's the education is already there. The education is still happening, but still that is not controlling radicalization. I think it's coming from home or other places. Like in France, that I'm giving the example, the children, the teacher told them that those who do not want to see this, they can go away or turn their face, but still those children took offense, and so my question is that education, educating alone will not work. I think it's something more deeper at the family level itself.
Ravish, education, it's not presented as a rigid thing that is connected with school only, because education is it has a wide spectrum. It has to come from the family, from the society, from the media, from the other structures of communication that people can reach others. It's to be a wider perspective. One of the major things that we can influence is the content of the curriculum and the way of teaching. That can have certainly an influence. And if critical thinking as a way of approach, if that's developed, children will grow by themselves. But of course, how can we influence, for example, families where there are fanatic parents are there? It's difficult. But those parents who understands the value of liberty, we should be able to tell them how, for example, the idea of critical thinking and the faculties of critical thinking can be promoted. Another thing Mr. Mohan Malhotra has been speaking was also important, like how, for example, how can we take up these issues at a broader level to other countries? Like, for example, in Britain, yes, it's a secular society. But for example, even in Britain, look at the British Constitution, though it's not written, it has a monarch, it has a state religion officially. I mean, but the British society is very secular and everybody accepts the value of secularism. So there are still, I mean, why, for example, the Anglican Church is still in that position where we have to do. I mean, in Europe, for example, in Finland, there is still official religions like the Evangelical Lutheran Church. Its influence is going down and down, but still there is an official religion. There is monarchy in Sweden, in Norway. So there are many things that has to happen in Europe also. It's not that everything is perfect, but it's not dangerous anymore because they are not influencing. Democracy has taken deeper roots that it's the guiding force now. And people have certain values that has deeper influence that it's not very easy to reverse. But that's not the situation in many other countries. So, for example, what can you do in Saudi Arabia now?
In UK, like in UK, there are a lot of Christians, but when you talk to them, they say, "Oh, I'm a Christian, but I don't believe. I don't go to church." So I mean, you have got to say with the Hindus. They're Hindus. They tell them, "Oh, I'm a Hindu, but I don't pray." I mean, so there people are there. They still have labels, but they actually don't believe in the faith. And there people are thinking about all these things. As you mentioned, in UK, churches are used for other functions nowadays. That's true because they're not able to get the money. There's no people don't go and donate money anymore to the churches, because everybody's thinking independently now. So yeah, it's happening in UK, and I'm sure by the end of the century, maybe we won't have bishops in the House of Lords, and all those things will be gone. We're still fighting for that. The British Humanist is fighting quite a lot here in this country, and they're doing some good job also. So I think things will change. Things will change.
I have been, I mean, maybe in connection with that, I have to also tell about my experience recently when I was invited to attend a meeting in the Parliament of British Parliament, where there is a lobby of non-believing, Parliament members. Yes. They are a group, and they have an elected leader, and collectively, despite the political spectrum from all the parties, I mean, all these people who are non-believers, and they were together, and they have a body, and in the Parliament Annex, they had a meeting, and I was also there, and such an interesting thing. But what are they demanding? There are still representatives of the church in the upper house.
That's true.
There is a prayer in the beginning of the Parliament. If you don't go in the time, I mean, you can skip it, but it's not stopped yet. So there are a lot of efforts. Still, the non-believing group in the Parliament is lobbying and arguing to modify these kind of old laws. Most of these countries of traditional laws, though the society has changed, all these are existing. So religion, can go from our life when all this paraphernalia that was coming from the past are systematically removed one by one by one. It's a fight on several different fronts.
True.
Thank you. Who else? Somebody from Finland. I see a lot of people from Finland, but nobody's speaking. So if there is no further discussion, we can end here and continue the discussion in another form. See, every Saturday we are trying to make a meeting like this on different topics. But if you have any suggestion, proposal, what we should discuss, please do write, because we are trying to improve these meetings one by one, and these topics will be further discussed, and part of it can be on YouTube also later, maybe in this form, or further presented on the basis of discussions. Thank you very much. If there is no other question, we end now.
Thank you. Thanks, Sanal.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your participation and